Hey there, and welcome. Have you ever just stopped and looked around and noticed that even though we have more comfort, more choices, and just more stuff than ever before, a lot of us don't really feel more satisfied? You get the thing you wanted, and almost right away, your brain is already scouting for the next target. It's this weird puzzle that affects pretty much all of us. So, yeah, let's get into it.
So, why is it a trap? Wanting more feels totally natural, doesn't it? We want to get better, have nicer things, do cooler stuff. But what if that very instinct, the one that feels so right, is actually the source of so much of our modern-day unhappiness?
All right, here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the happiness paradox, a sort of glitch in our biology. Then we'll jump back in time to see how ancient wisdom already had this figured out. After that, we'll explore the modern maze and why today's world makes this all so much harder. And finally, we'll wrap up with a practical toolkit for finding a little more contentment.
Okay, let's start with our own brains. It turns out we're wired with this feature that was, super useful for our survival back in the day. But now, in the modern world, it's kind of become a bug in our system when it comes to being happy.
So it all comes down to this really wild trade-off. Researchers have found that the very same mental habits that make us feel dissatisfied, like comparing ourselves to others or getting used to the good things we have, are also the exact same habits that help us learn faster. This constant drive to do better is amazing for adapting and improving, but man, it comes at a cost. We're almost programmed to constantly undervalue what's already right in front of us.
Rachit Dubey, the study's lead author, gave this perfect example. Imagine you get a 90 on a test. You're feeling great, but then you find out that your friend, who usually does worse than you, got a 96. All of a sudden, poof, your happiness is just gone. That little sting of unhappiness, it's painful for sure, but it's also a seriously powerful motivator to study harder for the next one. So you see, it's a feature, not a bug, at least when it comes to learning.
But here's the thing. This feeling is not new. Not at all. Way before we had brain scans and computer models, ancient philosophies had already pinpointed this exact problem. They actually had a diagnosis for our endless treadmill of wanting.
Yeah, in Buddhism, they call it tanha. It's a word from the Pali language, and it means things like thirst, desire, or craving. But we're not just talking about wanting a snack. This is that deep, gnawing feeling that things should be different. And in Buddhism, this is seen as the direct cause of what they call dukkha, which is suffering, or just that general feeling of dissatisfaction we all know so well.
And this craving isn't just one thing either. It gets broken down into three main types. You've got the craving for sensual pleasures, great food, entertainment, that kind of thing. Then there's the craving for existence, this deep desire to be someone, to have an identity, to matter. And finally, there's the craving to get away from it all, that desperate wish to avoid pain, discomfort, or anything unpleasant. Does any of that sound familiar?
Now, the Stoics, they came at this from a completely different angle, but funny enough, they ended up in a really similar place. Their whole approach was totally counterintuitive. They said, look, instead of running around trying to bend the world to your will to get what you want, you should do the complete opposite. Manage your desires on the inside. Basically, want what you already have. That was a radical idea back then, and it's still pretty radical now.
Okay, so if this is an ancient problem, and ancient people already had some pretty good insights, why does it feel so much more intense today? Well, the answer really lies in our modern world, which has kind of become this giant maze that just pours gasoline on this very human fire. Psychologist Barry Schwartz has a great name for this, the paradox of choice. And the idea is actually pretty simple, but it's huge. We all think that more choice is better, right? It means more freedom, more opportunity. But what he found is that there's a tipping point. Once you have too many options, choice stops feeling liberating and starts feeling, debilitating. It just paralyzes you.
Just think about the last time you were in a big grocery store. Do you really need 285 different kinds of cookies to choose from, or 95 kinds of snack chips? What should be a simple decision, I want a cookie, suddenly becomes this huge research project, and it's loaded with the potential for regret. This crazy abundance turns a simple task into a source of real anxiety.
And to make matters even worse, our brains are hardwired with something called loss aversion. Basically, the pain of losing something feels more than twice as intense as the pleasure you get from gaining the exact same thing. So, when you're staring at those 285 cookie options, the fear of picking the wrong one and missing out on the absolute best one can completely overshadow the joy of the cookie you actually walk away with. It's wild. So, what does all this do to us? Well, this overload of options forces us to change how we make decisions.
We stop being what Schwartz calls choosers, people who actually take a second to reflect on what they truly want. Instead, we become pickers. We just frantically grab an option, any option, just to make the decision-making stop. And the result? We feel less satisfied, and we're always wondering, should I have picked the other one?
Okay, so after all that, how our brains are wired to want more and how we live in a world that turns us into anxious pickers, things might sound a little bleak. But it's not hopeless, not even close. If we combine what we know from modern psychology with some of that ancient wisdom, we can actually build a toolkit to help us navigate this whole maze.
So here are a few really powerful strategies we can use. We're going to look at why just aiming for good enough is often way better than searching for the absolute best. We'll talk about how to actively practice gratitude, and we'll even try out a cool Stoic trick for taking the power out of a strong desire. Finally, we'll see how setting our own limits can actually make us feel more free.
All right, let's start with a really practical exercise from the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. He suggested this little thought experiment. So next time you feel a really strong desire for something, say a fancy, expensive wine, just pause and break it down into its most basic objective parts. It's not some magic potion. It's just fermented grape juice. That beautiful designer coat, it's just some wool from a sheep that's been dyed with, I don't know, crushed up shellfish. When you strip away all the fancy marketing words, you see things for what they are, and the desire kind of loses its grip on you.
And this brings us to gratitude, which is so much more than just a nice feeling. It's an active practice. Just like Marcus Aurelius says here, look at the good things in your life, and then imagine for a second how desperately you would want them if you lost them. That simple mental flip is incredibly powerful. It helps you fall back in love with what you already have, and that is the perfect antidote to always wanting more.
Now this is the ultimate mindset shift. It comes from another Stoic philosopher, Epictetus. He said that instead of getting all bent out of shape when things don't go your way, you should practice wanting them to happen exactly as they do. Now this isn't about being passive or giving up. It's about radical acceptance. It's about choosing to work with reality instead of fighting against it. And when you can do that, you can transform all that potential frustration into real peace and strength.
Look, I know this can all feel a little abstract. So here is something you can literally do at your very next meal. It's a super simple mindfulness exercise. Before you take your first bite, just stop. Take 3 slow, deep breaths. And then as you eat, really try to focus only on the food, the smell, the taste, the textures. It's such a small way to practice being present and to just appreciate what's right there in front of you.
So, I'll leave you with this one last thought to take with you. Just take a moment right now and really think about it. What is one thing? It could be a person, a thing, a skill, a memory. What is one thing you have in your life right now that you would absolutely desperately crave if it were suddenly gone? Try to hold on to that feeling, because that right there might just be the secret to contentment.